Welcome back to UnderCover, Waterproofing and Underpinning Secrets, the podcast from us here at DGI Waterproofing.
Glad to be back.
Last time we got into some really interesting new tech in basement waterproofing. Keeping water out at step one for a healthy home, something we're pretty passionate about.
Exactly. And today, we're kind of building on that. We're tackling something closely related, we deal with the consequences of daily.
Common household molds.
That's the one. We're going to dive deep into it.
Right. We're actually pulling a lot of this straight from one of our recent blog posts, Common Mold Found in Homes. It's packed with stuff our teams have learned over years out in the field.
Yeah, the goal for this deep dive is really to help you understand what these silent invaders are, where they like to hide, and maybe most importantly, why you really need to pay attention. For your property, sure, but also definitely for your health.
Okay. There are apparently some surprising facts in here, too.
Oh, definitely. Things people might not connect directly to mold.
All right, let's unpack it. Let's get informed. So, first things first. What is mold, fundamentally? Seems simple, but maybe not.
Well, at its core, it's a microscopic fungus. It's actually all around us, all the time. Indoors, outdoors. Tiny little spores just floating in the air.
Just waiting.
Exactly. Waiting for the right conditions to land and, set up shop and grow.
And those conditions, that brings us right back to waterproofing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Mold basically needs two things it can't live without. Moisture, number one, and an organic food source.
And that food source can be a lot of things, right? Not just rotting wood.
Oh, yeah. Anything carbon-based, really.
Yeah.
Wood, obviously, but also drywall, the paper backing on insulation, fabrics, carpets, even just regular household dust can feed it if there's enough moisture.
So add water to almost anything organic, and you've got a potential mold buffet.
Pretty much. Which is why you always see it pop up in certain places.
Like bathrooms, kitchens.
Those are classics. Bathrooms, kitchens, laundry rooms, and of course the big ones we deal with constantly. Basements and crawl spaces.
Because they're prone to leaks, condensation, just general dampness.
Exactly. Even a tiny persistent leak or just high humidity is like rolling out the welcome mat for mold spores.
So managing that moisture indoors, that's really the key, isn't it?
It's the absolute foundation of prevention. Control the moisture, you control the mold. It's the principle behind everything we do in waterproofing.
Now, something you mentioned, and I think this is important, is that not all mold is created equal in terms of risk.
That's a really crucial point. It's not just one single bad guy. You can think of it like a three-tier system of threat level.
Okay, a threat system. Let's break that down. Tier 1.
Tier 1 we call allergenic molds. Think of them as the annoying neighbors.
Okay. Annoying neighbors. Why?
Because they're super common, found in loads of homes. They aren't inherently toxic, but their spores are what trigger allergies in people who are sensitive.
So sneezing, coughing, itchy eyes, asthma attacks, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Those kinds of reactions. Unpleasant, definitely unwelcome, but generally not causing severe illness in healthy folks.
Got it. Annoying, messes with allergies. What's tier 2?
Moving up a step, you've got pathogenic molds. These are maybe the troublemakers.
Okay, troublemakers sound worse than annoying neighbors.
They are. They're less common than the allergenic types, thankfully, but they're a bigger worry because they can actually cause infections.
Infections? In your body?
Yes, particularly in people with weaker immune systems. But sometimes even healthy people can get infections from these. They can invade living tissues, organs. Definitely requires medical attention.
Wow. Okay, so not just triggering a reaction, but actively infecting. And the top tier, tier 3.
Tier 3 is the most serious category, toxigenic molds. These are the dangerous criminals.
Dangerous criminals. Sounds bad.
It is. Fortunately, these are the rarest. You typically only find them where there's been a really severe long-term mold problem, like serious water damage that's just been left unchecked for ages.
And what makes them dangerous?
They produce something called mycotoxins. These are basically harmful chemical substances that can cause significant health problems in both humans and animals. When you're dealing with toxigenic mold, especially certain types, professional remediation isn't just recommended, it's pretty much essential.
Okay, so knowing these tiers helps gauge the risk. But finding it, identifying it, we need to know the usual suspects, right? The ones we see most often.
Exactly. Based on our field experience, there are definitely a few common culprits that turn up again and again.
Let's meet them. First on the list, cladosporium.
Cladosporium. Probably one of the most common indoor molds you'll find. Appearance-wise, it's usually greenish-black or maybe brown. Yeah. Often has a kind of fuzzy or velvety texture.
Fuzzy. And where does this fuzzy one like to set up shop?
It's pretty adaptable. You find it on painted walls, wood furniture, carpets, fabrics. Also really common around window frames, where condensation can build up.
Even though it's mostly allergenic, seeing it is still a sign of dampness.
Absolutely. It flags that moisture issue. Still causes those allergy symptoms for sensitive people.
Right. Annoying. Okay, next. Penicillium. That name rings a bell for a totally different reason.
It sure does. It's a classic example of nature's duality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some strains give us the life-saving antibiotic, penicillin.
But finding that growing on your wall is definitely not good news.
Not at all. Good in the lab, bad in the living room.
So what does the bad version look like?
Indoors, penicillium usually shows up as blue or green mold, often with a sort of powdery look.
And where does it tend to grow?
It loves water-damaged materials. Think soggy insulation, damp ceiling tiles, wallpaper that's gotten wet, carpet padding.
And it spreads easily.
Very easily. Spores become airborne really quickly, just with air currents or slight disturbances, so you inhale them easily.
Leading to?
Respiratory problems, definitely. Chronic sinus infections are a big one linked to penicillium. And some strains can produce mycotoxins, so there's that added level of concern.
Is there a telltale sign for this one?
One thing we sometimes hear, and it's backed by research, is if you have persistent sinus or breathing issues that noticeably get better when you're away from home for a while, penicillium could be lurking somewhere.
That's a really useful clue. Okay, number 3. Aspergillus.
Aspergillus, another extremely common one, found all over the world. The tricky thing with aspergillus is it looks like, well, lots of things. It comes in many forms and colors: white, yellow, green, even black.
So if it can look like anything, where should we be checking?
It loves consistently moist or humid places. Bathrooms, kitchens are prime spots. Look in grout, behind wallpaper, in caulking, around window frames, on textiles. It can even get into your HVAC system, the heating and cooling ducts.
HVAC systems, that means it can spread throughout the house easily.
Exactly. And wood surfaces, too, if they're damp. It's quite opportunistic.
And the health side of aspergillus?
This one warrants more caution. While often okay for healthy people, certain species can cause serious lung infections called aspergillosis.
Who's most at risk for that?
Primarily people with compromised immune systems or those with existing chronic lung conditions. If aspergillosis is suspected, getting medical help early is really important.
We also learned something interesting about it, and temperature changes.
Yeah, it's quite resilient. It can kind of go dormant when it gets cold, but then it snaps right back and starts growing again when things warm up.
Yeah.
You might see it flare up seasonally in some homes.
Interesting survival tactic.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to alternaria.
Alternaria, another very common one, often found hanging out near cladosporium. Looks-wise, it's typically dark green or black, also with that kind of fuzzy texture.
Another fuzzy one. Where does it like to be?
Loves wet spots. Showers, bathtubs, under sinks, near leaky pipes, classic locations. But it's also adaptable. It can grow with less obvious moisture, like inside ductwork or even on upholstery sometimes.
And we often see this one in older places.
Yeah, we often find alternaria in older homes or buildings that have those kind of low-level chronic dampness issues that maybe haven't been fully addressed.
And health-wise.
It's a major allergen, a really common trigger for asthma attacks, and those typical allergic reactions: sneezing, coughing, skin irritation. It grows fast in damp conditions, and its spores spread easily through the air.
Okay, and finally, the one everyone dreads hearing about. Stachybotrys, a.k.a. black mold.
Ah, yes, Stachybotrys chartarum. It definitely gets the most headlines, and for good reason. Visually, it's typically dark green or black, and when it's actively growing, it often looks kind of slimy or wet. It starts small, but can spread into bigger patches.
And where does this particular dangerous criminal, as you called it, like to grow? It's picky, right?
It is. It needs materials rich in cellulose to feed on. So think drywall, ceiling tiles, wooden beams, the paper backing on some wallpapers.
And crucially, it needs more than just a bit of dampness.
Exactly. Unlike some others that can thrive on just high humidity, Stachybotrys needs long-term, persistent moisture, serious ongoing water issues.
Like chronic leaks or after a flood.
Precisely. Ongoing plumbing leaks, roof leaks that haven't been fixed for a while, or areas that flooded and weren't dried out properly and quickly, that's where you find Stachybotrys.
And the health effects. These are the ones considered potentially more severe.
Generally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Exposure has been linked to more significant symptoms. Things like persistent headaches, chronic fatigue, memory issues that brain fog people talk about, and serious respiratory problems.
And there was that concern about infants.
Yes, years ago there was a controversial suggested link to pulmonary bleeding in infants. While it's still debated in scientific circles, the potential severity means any suspected stachybotrys needs to be taken extremely seriously.
So bottom line, if you think you see this slimy black stuff, don't touch it, don't try to clean it yourself.
Absolutely not. Given the moisture it needs and the potential health risks, suspected stachybotrys always requires professional assessment and character remediation. Trying a DIY cleanup can just spread the spores and make things worse.
Okay, those are the big five we run into. You also mentioned a few lesser-known ones briefly.
Just quickly, yeah. There's Orivicidium looks pink, brown or black, linked to skin, eye, nail infections. Don't touch it. Cactomium looks white, cottony, very dangerous for immunocompromised people. And Fusarium often starts outside, but can move indoors in really damp spots like under wet carpets or in HVACs, causing skyny issues.
It really highlights that mold is diverse, but that moisture connection is universal.
Exactly. And you can't tell the risk just by looking. Color doesn't equal danger level.
Which leads us nicely into the health reality check. Let's go a bit deeper. Immediate effects are allergies, right?
Yeah, for sensitive people, that's often the first sign. Hay fever type stuff.
Yeah.
Sneezing, runny nose, red eyes, maybe a skin rash.
But the respiratory connection is huge.
It really is. Spending time in damp, moldy buildings is strongly linked to a whole range of breathing problems. Coughing, congestion, more frequent respiratory infections.
And it can actually cause asthma or make existing asthma worse.
Both, unfortunately. It can trigger the development of asthma in susceptible people, especially children, and definitely worsen symptoms for those who already have it. Plus, links to things like hypersensitivity pneumonitis, serious lung inflammation, allergic rhinitis, and even eczema.
And some people are just more vulnerable.
Definitely. Infants, kids, the elderly, anyone with a weakened immune system, and people with existing respiratory conditions like allergies, asthma, or COPD. They need to be extra careful.
Now, this is where it gets really surprising for many people. The impact isn't just lungs and noses.
No, and this is an area getting more attention. Extended exposure is being linked more and more clearly to cognitive issues. That brain fog description is common.
What does that actually mean, brain fog?
It can manifest as short-term memory loss, trouble concentrating, feeling dizzy or lightheaded, blurred vision, ringing in the ears, just a general feeling of not thinking clearly. It seems to be a broader systemic effect.
Wow. Memory loss from mold, that's serious. And there's a genetic factor, too.
Yeah, this is pretty frightening. Research suggests maybe up to a quarter of the population, 25%, might have genes that make them more susceptible to getting sick from mold exposure.
So a quarter of us might react much more severely and not even realize mold is the trigger.
It's possible, yes.
And the impact on babies? That's worrying for parents.
Very worrying. Studies show infants living with visible mold in their first year have almost 3 times the risk of developing asthma later on. It really drives home how vital a healthy, mold-free environment is right from the start.
Okay, so the health risks are real, varied, potentially severe. Finding it can be the next challenge, though. How do you detect this hidden enemy?
Well, your eyes are your first tool, a good visual inspection. Since mold follows moisture, you're really looking for water problems first.
Stains, discoloration, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Water stains on walls, ceilings, floors. Then look for the mold itself, those dark spots or patches. Remember, they can be black, green, brown, yellow, white, fuzzy.
But what if you smell it but don't see it?
Ah, the nose knows. The distinct, musty, earthy smell. If you notice that, especially if it's stronger in closed-off areas like closets or basements, that's a huge red flag for hidden mold.
And where does it typically hide?
Oh, all the usual suspects for hidden moisture. Inside wall cavities, above ceiling tiles, under flooring or carpets, behind big furniture or appliances, definitely in crawl spaces and basements, behind cabinets, around toilets and sinks.
Yeah.
Anywhere water can linger unseen.
So if you smell the smell or you know you had a leak but you can't find the mold, that's when you call in pros like us.
That's generally the best move, yes. We have tools like moisture meters to find hidden dampness. Sometimes thermal cameras can spot anomalies. We can help confirm if there's hidden growth.
What about mold testing? People ask about that a lot.
Yeah, it's a common question. Here's the thing. If you could see mold, testing to find out the exact species usually isn't necessary, unless maybe for specific health reasons or legal documentation.
Why?
Because there are no official federal limits for how much mold is acceptable in a building. Testing doesn't tell you if you're compliant with anything. Seeing mold means you have a problem that needs fixing specifically, the moisture problem. Identification is secondary to removal and prevention.
Okay, so see it, smell it, call for help if it's hidden. But the best approach is always prevention.
Always. Prevention is absolutely your best defense, and it all comes back to that golden rule.
Control the moisture.
Control the moisture, control the mold. Simple as that.
And there's that critical time frame after something gets wet.
Yes, the 24 to 48-hour rule. You have to get water-damaged areas and items thoroughly dry within that window. Miss it, and mold growth is practically guaranteed.
Beyond emergencies, how do you manage moisture day to day?
Humidity control is key. Aim to keep indoor humidity below 60%, ideally between 30% and 50%.
How do you do that? Dehumidifiers.
Dehumidifiers help in damp areas like basements. Using exhaust fans in kitchens and bathrooms every time you cook or shower is crucial. Make sure they actually vent outside. Opening doors, even closet doors sometimes, helps air circulate.
And just general home maintenance.
Absolutely. Fix leaks promptly. Roof, pipes, windows, doesn't matter how small it seems. Keep your HVAC system clean and maintained. Good ventilation overall is essential.
And thinking longer term, structurally, this is where DGI's expertise really comes in, right? Preventing the water from getting in the first place.
Exactly. Beyond the daily stuff, you have to look at how water interacts with your home structure. Improving ventilation in attics, crawl spaces, basements is one part, but managing outdoor water is huge.
Like making sure gutters work, the ground slopes away from the house.
Yes, ensuring proper drainage around the foundation is critical. Things like underground downspout extensions, maybe French drains, or even exterior foundation waterproofing membranes. These stop the water before it can seep into your basement or crawl space where mold loves to grow.
We see it constantly fix the water entry point, and the mold problem often resolves long term.
It's the most effective strategy. And for those areas like basements and crawl spaces that are already prone to issues.
That's where we come in to assess.
Right. We look for those vulnerabilities, foundation cracks, poor drainage, inadequate sealing. Then we recommend the right solutions, whether it's crack injection, installing an interior drainage system, crawl space encapsulation, or full basement waterproofing. It's about eliminating that moisture source for good.
Addressing the root cause. It's always more cost-effective than dealing with mold cleanup over and over.
Always. Prevention is the smart investment.
But okay, let's say you do find mold. What about cleanup? When is it DIY? When do you call us?
Good question. For small, isolated patches, the guideline is generally less than about 10 square feet total, maybe like a 3 by 3 foot area. The EPA suggests homeowners can often handle it themselves.
If they take precautions.
Take precautions. What's safe for DIY? Simple stuff can work. Soap and water, maybe a vinegar solution, baking soda paste. But the safety gear is non-negotiable. Gloves are a must. And a proper mask, an NOH-approved N95 respirator to filter out those spores. Don't skimp on the mask.
And ventilation.
Absolutely. Open windows, get air moving while you work.
Okay, small spots, mask, gloves, ventilation. When does it become a call to professionals situation?
Definitely, if the mold covers more than that 10 square feet. Also, if it keeps coming back after you clean it, that signals a deeper moisture problem you're not fixing.
And if vulnerable people live there.
Yes, crucially. If infants, elderly folks, immunocompromised people, or those with serious respiratory conditions are in the home, call the pros regardless of the patch size. Minimize their risk.
And for suspected black mold, statutories.
Always call professionals. Not worth the risk.
Who should just never even attempt to clean up themselves?
Anyone with severe allergies or mold sensitivity, people with compromised immune systems, or those with chronic lung diseases like asthma or COPD, the exposure risk during cleanup is just too high for them.
So what do the pros do differently? What does remediation involve?
Well, first, we assess the full extent, find hidden mold, pinpoint the moisture source. Then containment is key, isolating the area so spores don't spread.
Like plastic sheeting and negative air pressure?
Exactly. Then safe removal of moldy materials using specialized equipment. We use HEPA air scrubbers constantly to capture airborne spores. After removal, thorough cleaning and disinfecting. Then usually a final check or testing to confirm it's gone.
And hopefully advice on preventing recurrence, often pointing back to waterproofing or ventilation needs.
A good remediator will always address the why, which again often leads back to needing solutions like the ones we provide at DGI. And economically, professional remediation isn't cheap. It can range from hundreds to, in severe cases, tens of thousands of dollars. Prevention is always, always cheaper.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, before we wrap up, let's bust a few common mold myths we hear all the time. Myth number 1. You can tell how dangerous mold is by its color.
Total myth. Reality check. Color tells you almost nothing about toxicity. Black mold isn't always stachybotrys, and other colors can be produced by toxigenic species. You just can't judge the risk by looking at the color.
Myth number 2. Just spray some bleach on it. That kills mold.
Ah, the bleach myth. Reality check. Bleach might kill surface mold on non-porous things like tile, but it often doesn't penetrate porous stuff like drywall or wood where the mold's roots are. More importantly, killing isn't enough.
Right. You have to remove it.
Exactly. Dead mold spores and fragments still contain allergens and potentially harmful substances. You have to physically remove the mold growth, not just kill it in place. Bleach doesn't do that effectively, especially on porous surfaces.
And myth number 3. If I can't see any mold, there's no problem.
Big reality check here. Mold loves hiding. Inside walls, behind wallpaper, under floors, in attics, crawl spaces, HVAC ducts. If you smell that musty, earthy odor, trust your nose. It often means mold is present, even if invisible. And the spores themselves are microscopic anyway.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive. Mold, complex, often hidden, needs moisture, and poses real risks to health and home.
That's the gist. And the biggest takeaway, the thing we stress constantly from our work in the field, controlling moisture is the #1 prevention strategy. Fix leaks fast, manage humidity, keep air flowing.
And know your limits. Small surface spots. Maybe DIY with serious safety gear. Anything bigger, recurring, involves vulnerable people, where it looks like black mold. Time to call in experts. Don't ignore the signs, the smell, the spots, the symptoms.
Absolutely. And from our perspective at DGI Waterproofing, this is why we do what we do. Fixing those basement leaks, sealing crawl spaces, ensuring proper drainage. It's not just about stopping water. It's fundamentally about creating a healthy indoor environment where mold can't get a foothold.
It really is about building that safe, healthy home foundation for families. Taking proactive steps to manage moisture and improve airflow is just paramount.
We can certainly help assess where your home might be vulnerable and figure out the best long-term solutions.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering how much mold depends on moisture and how good it is at hiding, what unseen parts of your own home might be collecting dampness right now, silently creating risks you might not even be aware of?